Welcome to Sunday Civics. This is the first week we're not going to be live. And if we're not going to be live, you can't ask questions, obviously. So we apologize for that. But sometimes it's essential. And this week, this would be recording in June, but Juneteenth is something that I've heard about for a long time and never really knew what it was. I started to ask a lot of questions in the last couple of years, but I've also talked to a lot of people who don't know anything about Juneteenth. So we need to. If we're talking civics and we're talking civil society and we're talking how a city works and operates, Juneteenth, when you read up on it, is one of the most important dates in American history, all of American history. It's not Black American history or any other. There's no segment of American history. It's one of the most important dates in American history, and certainly one that we don't know anything about. So coming up to talking about civics now in the last year, I thought we better ask somebody who knows to educate us on this. So also, we want to know about Niagara Falls Juneteenth, keeping this entire civics discussion about the city of Niagara Falls. How local could we make this? We found somebody. So we found Fania Neighbors, who works with the board of Juneteenth in Atlanta, but also was born and raised in Niagara Falls, New York. So it's kind of like the best thing we could ever find is right here. So anyway, Fania, thanks. Sorry for that long-winded intro, but thanks for joining us and thanks for doing this morning.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
How much of that did I get wrong? And why don't you introduce yourself? Because I don't do things right.
No, you were spot on. But I am Fania Neighbors, definitely born in Niagara Falls on Calumet Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in Atlanta for quite some time now. And we do a great deal of work in the community to rebuild different communities and also bring awareness. So I think this discussion is very beneficial.
You were born and raised in the Falls. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
So at what age did you move? Like 18, 25?
No, we left
12?
sooner than that. I was
Right.
about 10. And we ended up moving only to Rochester for my father's job.
Right. So what is Juneteenth? I love this. Act as if I know nothing. I do know nothing. So I do know it was 1865 and 66 and that kind of stuff. But give me a primer on Juneteenth.
Sure. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed on January 1st in 1863. And so it didn't free all the slaves. That mainly applied to like certain states. So not every state relinquished their slaves. It wasn't until about 2.5 years later that Robert E. Lee surrendered, and General Gordon Granger went into Texas, took control of Texas, and ordered them to release their slaves. That was on June 19th when they arrived. So June 19th, Juneteenth.
Okay, and were they the last state to do it or the first state to do it? Why is
They're the
Texas
last.
they were the last? Okay, because Texas usually isn't the most enlightened place in my eyes of empowerment. So Juneteenth, because it happened in different dates in different states, so it was the last one.
Mhm.
Did it go smoothly? I can't believe it's going smoothly today.
No.
But what happened when they did it on June 9th?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of people that were resistant to that, but these were new orders, so they had to comply, but it happened over time,
Mhm.
and so the June 19th date is the day that's commemorated because that's when the orders came. Like, you have to set these slaves free. But they didn't go without a fight. You've had slave owners that were losing a great deal of money. I have to release my slaves. So what am I going to do now? So of course they were angry. There were a lot of upset people. And even after that, there were some people that were, I want to call them indentured, because they still continued to work as slaves because they honestly had nothing or nowhere to go. So they continued, and they still didn't receive pay, but they were freed.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, I always wondered why we had fireworks on the 4th of July. And did it just start to happen? No, actually, John Adams said we shall always have fireworks and commemorate the day of this signing. Did Juneteenth just, did anybody make such a proclamation when it happened, or was it just over time that we should really recognize this date in history, or was it announced at that date that like we should remember June 19th, or like when did it become the
following year is when certain like leaders of the Black community or the African American community began to come together, and they would just celebrate and gather. It was very small. It was just kind of, let's come together and remember the day we were set free.
Okay.
You know, it didn't become a big deal, like a celebration, until around the 70s, 1970s.
1970. So it was more of an internal, thank God this happened. Yeah. And it became an external, like let's all thank God it happened. You know, Absolutely. That kind of thing. Okay. Why in the 70s, and has it picked up steam, and where's it going? You know, just look ahead 200 years for me if you could. You know,
yeah, absolutely. I believe it has picked up a lot of steam. Initially, when Juneteenth was celebrated, it was also met with a lot of opposition because there was the argument, why do you need a holiday when we already have the 4th of July?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But as Frederick Douglass said, what is the 4th of July to a slave?
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
July,
this is the day you rejoice and you celebrate, but I was still enslaved.
Yeah.
So there's two totally different holidays that both represent freedom. So with the 70s, of course, there was a great deal of opposition that they faced, but slowly it gained recognition, I believe primarily in the South. I do understand that Juneteenth has not been celebrated publicly in Niagara Falls, but in neighboring cities it has. So certain areas are picking up slower than others. And while Atlanta is probably the biggest, one of the biggest, there are other cities that are still catching on. 100, 200 years from now, this holiday should be equal to the 4th of July.
Or surpass it. Because as you said, half the country was still enslaved.
Absolutely. That was more than half. When you think about the ratio of slaves to slave owners, the vast majority of people were not even free in 1863.
Right. So I guess my perspective is that it still gets talked about as a Black holiday or a Black event of Juneteenth. Why? Why isn't it my event too? I'm a white guy. Well, I don't.
Should be.
200 years from now is where, you know, that'll be gone. But today it still is. In 1970, it was definitely that. You know, I don't know that we've progressed far enough. Like what I know of June 19th, or when I ask people, it is still, well, that's a Black holiday. I don't get that part. Wait a minute, it's just a holiday or it isn't. You know, so we still have that barrier, right? I mean, I know.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's really strange because it shouldn't be considered a Black holiday.
Right.
It is a holiday that represents American freedom. This particular group of people were freed on this day, on American soil. Sorry. So that means all of America should rejoice.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the Black holiday, you know, type of thing, that's just something we're going to have to overcome.
But I'm not wrong. At least that's how I still hear people talk.
That's how it's referred to.
Yeah. Okay. It's not just me. I still hear it referred to that way. So you got out and traveled around and lived in Rochester, and now you live in Atlanta. Is Atlanta more enlightened about this than Niagara Falls or New York or upstate or, you know, northern? Like, is it in Atlanta, is it not a Black holiday and it still is here, or is it still a problem everywhere?
You run into types like of resistance everywhere. But because there's so many Black people here that are aware and they celebrate it, it kind of filters out that Black holiday thing. So when we gather, we do see all ethnicities. Next weekend, we're expecting people from almost every race because they're coming to celebrate. In Atlanta, the city of Atlanta granted us Centennial Olympic Park. We've never been there. We've
Yeah.
only ever been allowed to be at like small parks, small places. Centennial Olympic Park was a park that was built and dedicated for the Olympics that took place here in the 90s. There's never been an event or an event that's predominantly Black at Centennial like this.
Hmm.
So this is a great step in American history, not Black history.
Right. But Atlanta seems to be unique in that. I'm like,
Absolutely.
I couldn't find a huge celebration in Niagara Falls.
No.
I mean, again, maybe I couldn't, maybe there is, and I just don't know about it, but I don't know why it's not a bigger thing for everyone. And I had to ask a lot and I didn't really get great answers. So it must not be, a big one.
There is none.
Yeah. And who's that on? Like if we talk a year from now and we could wave a magic wand, who's that on? Like who do we talk to? Who do we break down some barriers?
Mayors, council members, different Congress members as well. But I would specifically start on the local level with the mayors and the city leaders. Those are the people that can help by counties to begin to allow small gatherings or even larger ones. I would definitely go to that first because one simple yes for one day, I mean, that could make a world of difference. I believe when people understand more about themselves and their history, they're able to identify with who they truly are.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps them. You know, it's like a fish out of water. You can't fully function, you can't operate if you're away from what you're used to. And so many Black people have no idea about their history. And I believe awareness can help with that.
Right. So what is the thing that everyone should know about Juneteenth to celebrate? Like just to be really ignorant about it, July 4th, everybody gets this silly tri-point hat and throws tea in the Boston Harbor, right? Like that mattered. But that's the level of mentality of shooting off fireworks and,
Yeah.
drinking beer. What is the sub? I mean, we have differences in the world. I was never enslaved. When it's kind of funny to me when people go back with like 23andme.com or whatever, the thing. Oh, my relatives came from X. Yours were put in chains and brought here against their will. I can never understand that. I need to understand it. I want to as much as I can. I can't understand a woman who has a baby because I can't. So we have to just accept that I can never understand what it's like. But what is the thing that we all should know about Juneteenth, that we should, start to appreciate about Juneteenth of, no, this is huge. You don't understand. Okay, so I should understand. What should I understand? What should we all start to celebrate? Because it's a weird celebration. It's good because we got rid of slavery. However, it was also a weird thing. What do we need to know? More than throwing tea in the harbor, more than just claiming slaves are free, because we know there's a long road before you don't just make people free and then, well, you don't have a job, so come to work for me for slave wages. What's the road been like? What should we change about Juneteenth in our heads going forward?
Understand that Juneteenth is rooted in strength. You do have the community, of course, that would be putting it on and trying to bring that awareness, but the history itself, you've got my ancestors who were brought here in chains and they were enslaved and many died, didn't make it even across. And the fact that they came here and they slaved for 400 years, the country you live in and enjoy today was built on the back of my ancestor struggle. So
Yeah.
the fact that those people were free is more than enough reason to celebrate. When you enter a building, when you enter and exit, when you look at different things that you operate daily, these things were built by slaves who were never paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about Juneteenth, think about the strength of those people who brought you to today. What you see today was built back then.
Is there a tremendous amount of guilt for that? Like I don't maybe want to look at that because I have so much guilt feeling, Like, how can I recognize that all that happened without feeling like a scoundrel? I'm not talking about me and you, but I'm just saying it's a very tough pill to swallow for some people and not others. Like, look what I did. I don't want to see what you did because I made you do it and I abused you. It's hard to grow a little in that regard.
But that's where it's necessary. It's a hard pill to swallow it anyway,
Yeah.
because it happened. So while we weren't the actual ones that were involved, those who came before us were. And so you understand and respect that area in history by paying homage to it.
Mm-hmm.
You understand the plight of those people by speaking about it and gaining an understanding without assumption. So I think that this entire interview is going to be helpful for those who listen who may also be ignorant about Juneteenth and the plight. It isn't a Black holiday. It's an American holiday because those people were brought here. My people were brought here against their will.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are. And look at the world today. It's still a beautiful place. And I believe we can all enjoy it together. So while we learn and we're educated about different groups, I believe this community needs to be in that number because it plays a vital part back then, today, and even in the future.
Thank you. One of the things that I like to imagine is all of us are smarter than any of us. So we all need each other to make any progress whatsoever. You
Indeed.
have lived a different life than me, and I've lived a different life than you. You need to know what I know, and I need to know what you know, and neither one less than the other or more than the other. So we can only get through this together and make progress. But that's harder than anything else.
Yeah.
Might as well try telling my cat that. People don't get it. That information goes around the world in a split second, in the last quarter inch of your skull, it doesn't go through. So thinking of that and using tools like Juneteenth, which we can learn about to break down other things that we might be reticent or paranoid to want to break down, is valuable. This is a great, I don't want to say excuse. This is a great excuse to deal with the bigger problems that we have, like talking to each other.
Right.
How do we do that locally? Like, you're in Atlanta and you're going to experience a fantastic thing, and you've lived all over. You've lived in several places, but also the whole world. Is the United States behind the curve on making progress? How do we talk to each other? I find a big, it's not just race problem, anger problem. People don't like each other much lately. Certainly Black and white, but all kinds of crap. People don't like each other. I guess, how do we, I don't know. I don't want to not like people anymore, but there's so much hostility. So how do we use things like Juneteenth to say, okay, it's at least one day that we're going to let our guard down and get together? How do we?
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
You can be kind on Juneteenth and the devil's advocate the day after.
Yeah.
And what have we accomplished?
Mm-hmm.
When I go to different countries to study or even just travel, it shows how far behind we are.
That was really my question. Other countries, where are we?
We're behind.
Yeah. Are we? I don't even think we're behind. I think we're last.
Like, we're probably the worst on the totem pole. I've gone to different places. I've gone to Africa. I've gone over into Asia. I've been over to the United Arab Emirates. There's no comparison.
That hurts, because in America, we want to be first in everything, and we're last in this. And I don't even think we're working on it.
No.
We're last and not even trying.
No. It's amazing. We've had about 6 months of crimes against Asians, and we already have an anti-Asian hate bill.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I'm excited that they received such action so quickly. But we've got hundreds of years of crimes against African Americans or Black minority colored people, whatever you will. And there's been nothing for that group.
How come?
That's legislation. I believe that That in addition to a few other things, like if there were rules or laws put in place to protect the African American community, where would that leave a lot of people?
Yeah. But there's even laws in place and we don't enforce them either.
No.
I mean, why? I don't get why. Because again, only from a selfish thing, if we're not working together, we're not going to make more money, more anything, more progress. We're not going to build a better city. So hopefully you'll come to learn about the Civics Project after today. You're just hearing about it now. My whole thing is we own a city that the world knows about, and it should be Shangri-La. Money's no problem. There's more money than you can possibly imagine. There's good people, and there's not yet a perfect city. So
Right.
I want to start the discussion of why not? What should we do? We want to create a perfect city. I don't care about Atlanta, frankly. I want Juneteenth to be the best thing ever to happen to Niagara
In
Falls.
Niagara Falls.
And I don't know how to make that happen. So, you know, if you were to bring Juneteenth to a city that really didn't know about it and had all the resources to make it something, we got one. Where would we start? You know, from this year forward, there are probably celebrations that I'm not aware of, but what would we do, you know, moving forward? How do we create Shangri-La here in your former hometown?
Education and awareness would be the start. What keeps coming to mind, honestly, are the children.
Mm-hmm.
Our children are our future. And I believe in so many situations, children can lead the way because they don't understand the hatred that we do. So
Mm-hmm.
they're able to show, receive, and just love based on this is another person, you know, and the education would have to come at all levels. And even though in my age group, you know, I'm 36, there may be opposing people. So the resistance is going to be something that we would have to fight through in order to get the message across, you know, because you could easily say, you have to learn this, you have to do this, but that's not beneficial to humankind because, okay, you're learning this about, you know, Black people, but you still don't want to associate with them,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I believe getting people to a place where they desire community, where they desire humanitarianism, where they desire to dwell with one another, that would be the key in building a successful, ongoing Juneteenth experience in Niagara Falls.
So, right, I think a lot of people are selfish and greedy as human nature, and we need to rely on each other. So that's why I always talk about any of this stuff as, well, we're going to build a city. So unless we get along, everybody, we can't make progress. So we have to get along. Or because we're now economically dependent or society dependent, we really we'll get along. If my life depends on you, I'm going to be pretty nice to you. If I don't need to know you, I don't need to know you.
Right.
So we have to need each other. I'm not how to do that. I'm not a social scientist. I don't know how to do that. But I don't understand when I've been asking questions about Niagara Falls, and I wasn't born there and I don't live there. And there's a lot of outsiderism and a lot of resistance from, well, you're not from here. We get that all the time. I get that. Well, not everybody's going to be from Atlanta or
Right.
Niagara Falls. And we can still want to have Shangri-La and the perfect city. So I don't know how we'll get over that, but I do find that, you know, that still we're not together, and I don't know how to overcome that where we're dependent on each other. And when you talk about education, are you talking about education or knowledge? Like, are you talking about changing the school system or just changing how we know about each other? Because I don't know about the school system. It's been messed up since I was a little kid, and it always costs more. Money's not the problem, but I don't know that it's any better than it ever was. Maybe it's not even that bad. But anyway, I don't know. We constantly talk about the school system, not you, but people bring that up all the time. And I'm like, well, I don't know. What would we do with the school system? It's just school. I hated school. I mean, I love knowledge, but I mean, nobody likes being locked down for 9 hours a day and, missing your kid friends. And anyway, when you talk about education, what should we know about it?
Understanding the holiday, for one. I mean, that's the big thing. Most people don't even know the holiday. So it's not celebrated. And understanding why it's celebrated. You know, everyone thinks, who doesn't know about Juneteenth, that we celebrate on the 4th because everybody was freed. That's not the case. It's not. And in that, with Niagara Falls specifically, the leaders of Niagara Falls are going to have to take a serious look at that. Niagara Falls is quite small, but the fact that they rate in the top 10 for crime in New York State, that says something.
3 people were shot Wednesday, and it really never even was reported.
What?
Now, maybe that happens in Atlanta, but it doesn't happen in Amherst or even Buffalo. Three gunshot victims, and nobody really even reported much of it. One person, I think, was shot in the chest and critical, and that got reported. The other two, just happens. They announced $46 million investment in the state park. 12 hours later, a person was shot and killed. Again, like you say, in a very small, intimate city, crime is out of control.
It is horrible. And a great deal of Niagara Falls is still impoverished, and whenever you see poverty, you see crime. They go together, so those two, as long as they're not being addressed or looked at, or if it's continually swept under the rug, then Juneteenth is the least of our worries.
Oh, you're making me crazy. So, in a good way. So, jobs are important. People need to have money to have a family and not have crime. That just seems social science 101.
Absolutely.
And today, the third highest ranking elected official in the free world is Chuck Schumer in the Senate. He is pushing like madman to invest hundreds of $millions in the Alabama swamp, which is about 45 minutes from Niagara Falls, to have an industrial facility in the middle of nowhere. I say that with all reverence. We need the middle of nowhere. There's farms. Literally, it's a swamp because it's a wetland. That should be cherished just for what it is. They're pouring concrete and running electrical lines to a cement pad for nothing. Why isn't that on Buffalo Avenue? And so my point being, until I know all your problems and make them mine, and you know all my problems and make them yours, we can't solve any problems. Now, whether it's Juneteenth or this farcical stamp plant project in the middle of a swamp, I think we've lost touch with what $1 million is. They give it away and throw it around like nothing.
Yeah.
What would $1 million do to the core of Niagara Falls if you gave it to a bunch of entrepreneurial businesses? It would probably change lives.
It would.
But a small manufacturing plant bragging about 60 jobs in the middle of a swamp, I just don't know where we've gone. And this is the third ranking, what I consider a pretty good guy, pushing this. I don't think it helps Juneteenth.
No.
I don't think it helps the poverty and crime in downtown Niagara Falls.
It doesn't. I don't know too much about that. I'm just thinking, like, I don't know how much sense it makes, but of course I don't know the root of it. And in regards to that, when you mention jobs, or the entrepreneurs receiving money, a great deal of these crimes are committed by younger people, and they don't have an outlet. There are no community centers in Niagara Falls that are open.
Mm-hmm.
So they have nowhere to go, nothing to do, so they're just influenced by this social media culture, and they do whatever they see online, and they're trigger happy.
Mm-hmm.
So entrepreneurs receiving money to begin like different businesses, whether it's brick and mortar or something else, that would help the city tremendously. And I can almost assure you that it would lower crime rates and even like the poverty level.
There's things, I'm fascinated by things I don't understand. And so I don't understand Juneteenth. So I'm talking to you, and I love this. This is how I learn. It used to be a disability, you know, because like maybe I couldn't read. I'm a verbal learner. We discovered not everybody learns the same way. So you're helping me quite a bit today. But I also never understood this immigrant thing where it seems in the immigrant community, they have micro loans and they don't go to M&T Bank and get $100,000 loan and have collateral. There's micro lending where they have $5,000 loans, and it's to start a small business, a really small business.
Yeah.
And the payback on those loans is something like 98%. They have no collateral attached to them. They're given to somebody with no experience, who doesn't speak the language proficiently or maybe at all.
Right.
And a 98% payback, I got to know more about that stuff. But we're not doing it. You know, like that isn't catching on for some reason.
Those loans are not readily available for everyone.
Why? If those work and $1 $100 million in the swamp ain't working, where's the disconnect? Is it just anger? Is it hatred? Is it I'm giving it to my friends? I mean, where is the disconnect? If the science says microloans work, pouring cement in the swamp really doesn't work, how do we, I'm at a loss for where the logic is here. The information is there.
It is. I believe for many people, there's an intentional desire to hold certain groups back. The Black community is one of them.
Yeah.
That's intentional.
Yeah. But I think we did that for 200 years and it was okay because I held you back. But now you're holding me back because there's no jobs. Now I'm feeling it. So it's a big issue now to everybody. It's so funny to think of it that way. It was always a problem, but it was your problem. Now it's my problem. Shit, we got to deal with this now.
Right.
I like that we're hitting this rock bottom point because now we can talk about it and it's everybody depending on everybody. This isn't poor Asian people, poor Black people. It's poor everybody in Niagara Falls, frankly. And now we can talk about it.
Absolutely. I mean, the increase in crime is one of the reasons my family desired to leave. And that was back in the 90s, 80s.
That was
a while getting bad back then.
Yeah.
You know, and even with so many family members still there, my family has suffered at the unfortunate end of a great deal of violence.
Your family is still here?
Yes.
Okay. And they report back to you that like it's not better than it was when you left.
Yeah, it's not. I'm still very close to my family, so I'm aware of what's going on. A few years ago, I lost a cousin. She was murdered in a domestic violence shooting. My sister was a part of that same shooting. She was paralyzed.
I'm sorry. And was it senseless? I'm sure everything is senseless, but you must be just beside yourself if this didn't need to happen.
Of course not. Of course not. And the thing is, at the time, they were only in their early 20s, 23, 22.
When I hear that, if it happened to the governor's child or the mayor's child or nephew, like something would be done, wouldn't it? Like if it happens to the right person, something gets fixed. And when it happens to just anybody, and there's more of just anybody's of us than those, select few, something gets done. How do we make it so that no matter what happens to somebody, we address it? Like, and again, I think Juneteenth is a solution to this. We all realize this isn't a Black holiday, it's everybody's holiday. And that opens us up to a little more intelligence about all the problems. If there's somebody who's shot on Pine Avenue and I didn't know them, it's still my problem. I should get to know them.
You're right.
I mean, how do we get there? I don't know. These are tough questions.
Changes, for sure. I don't know everyone, that's in the leadership positions in Niagara Falls currently, But if they're still there and these problems are continually increasing, they need to be reevaluated.
Mhm. Well, so I'm an outsider, and that's fine. I want this to be like Real Housewives of Atlanta or whatever, these popular shows. We should all be looking at Niagara Falls and saying, I don't know. I don't want a shooting on whatever street it is. I don't live on Pine Avenue, but I don't want a shooting there.
Right.
So, I look at Niagara Falls and there's 5 white males as your city council and a white mayor in a city that, all the crime I read is not 5 white people.
Right.
I don't know how you got there. Not you, but and maybe it won't be that way in the next council, but that's the way it is today in a relatively poor upstate city.
Mm-hmm.
I see more diversity in Batavia, New York. I mean,
right. And they're out of touch. You're not in touch with the people. You can't really help them.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that those 5 white males might not be. I'm not actually painting anybody with all of that. But you're right. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Right.
I don't even know where they live, but I bet you could throw a net over all of where they come from. So they probably don't come from Pine and 19th. I don't know that they don't, but I'm just making a generalization that I bet they don't. I don't know how did you morph to that? Not you, but how did the city with so many issues to challenge themselves morph to that? It wasn't a mistake. It's not, everything's by design. It's not by mistake. And can we solve the city's problems with that? I don't know. Anyway, I do think it comes from knowing more about one topic, Juneteenth. And then once your mind's open a little bit on something, you can open it up to other things.
Absolutely. Knowing about Juneteenth, the history of the African American people as a whole is beneficial. What's happened lately is that part of history is being modified in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Textbooks are now saying seriously that the slaves willingly came over and got jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know how to have that discussion with anyone that they're rewriting textbooks with stuff that isn't true.
I mean, that's the same thing that happened in South Africa. That's why the students fought during apartheid. They were teaching them lies.
I don't know that it did. So there's other people that have faced this and overcome it and turned it around.
Absolutely. So many students died in the fight against apartheid. When the students joined the fight, that's when things got really crazy because some of those students died as young as 13, 14, but they were simply fighting for their education. They wanted to learn what was true.
How did they know it wasn't true? They're 13. I mean, like a 13-year-old really doesn't know what's true or not. That's the problem. We're teaching them the wrong thing. How did they rise up? I mean, how did they even know it wasn't true?
The Afrikaners that came into South Africa, they began to change the books. And so all of the textbooks were now in Afrikaans and not in one of their official languages at all. But when translated, it was talking about like how the different Europeans were first in the world. Africa was not the first where Adam and Eve was. Like everything was reversed. And Europe was the primary country, and they knew this wasn't true.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, South Africa is a good example because it was so blatant.
Right.
The Europeans came in, created a city, right? And I don't know much of the history, but I mean, they created their own city and, like you said, taught people what they wanted them to know, which wasn't real, and it got absurd, right? And then it got fixed. How do we, in business, there's a thing of get to know quicker. No, like if you're going to tell me no now, so that I can move on. How do we have to burn it all down like South Africa to get it to be progressive? How do we make a change? How do we pivot? I don't want to burn it all down, but I don't want to we can't go on the way it is. How do we pivot?
That's a good one. They had to burn it all down. They had to march. They had to fight. They had to die.
Yeah.
We now have the power and ability to change things a little bit differently, so we have something called elections. They weren't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
we can choose to elect who we need in office, but we also need to have capable people that will run.
Mhm.
You know, that's a start is in regards to leadership. In regards to like students or anything like that. And actually I'm gonna jump to the bank thing that you mentioned. The groups that receive these micro loans are typically immigrants, and a great deal of Africans were too, but most all of them. But those loans are not readily available. And I can tell you firsthand because I've applied for some of those same loans. And I remember when we were in grad school, we did a project where we had to go apply for these loans and judge the different banks based on who can get approved. I was partnered with one Caucasian and one Asian. We all went with the same paperwork, the same business model, the same information. I was the only one rejected
Hmm. And where were you then? Where were you in school?
here in Atlanta.
Atlanta, okay.
Mhm.
Which is far more progressive than most places.
Right. So it's not that I believe these groups want to move forward, but there are people in place that are holding groups back intentionally.
Mhm. That's, I think, what's happened in the last X number of years is that we know it's intentional. That like maybe in the 70s or 80s, it was probably always intentional, but we kind of had an innocent eye towards, we just need to fix this. We need to have diversity or whatever. It's now okay to just say, I don't want diversity. And, even election results are going to be filtered through a legislative process instead of a voting process. It's a little bit spooky, scary.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here. So again, I only want to build one city. Atlanta can drop
Niagara
dead.
Falls.
Atlanta can drop dead for me. I don't mean that. But how do we do it in one city? Niagara Falls. What are the exact we can change laws specific for Niagara Falls only. We have 60% of the council turnover this year alone. We've got 6 more months to talk to the people that are running and ask them to do what we want. And I'm not sure we know what we want. That's where I am, at least. When I ask people, what do you want? And they just stare back because out of desperation. What do you mean, what do I want? I mean, I don't have a job. I don't have a house. There's people getting shot on my street. What do you mean, what do I want? That's where we are today in Niagara Falls, it seems. And people will call me negative. Oh my God, you should go over to this street. No, I don't want to go over to that street because there's only one of those streets and there's 100 of these other streets that I'm describing. And until we get everybody on the same page, until your problems are my problems and my problems are your problems, I'm not finding a lot of people that are receptive to this. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Why did you come
That's,
on the show?
I mean, you've got it all under control.
No, it's not under control. Fix it for us. So do you find that kind of desperation everywhere in the world, or are we more desperate really in the United States of America, in New York State, in the city of Niagara Falls?
It's everywhere.
Mhm.
Even though some cities are more progressive, they're not 100% there. And if you're judging from like America versus another country, we've got a long way to go. So it's not just Niagara Falls. We need this help across the country
Mhm.
because this hatred, this anger, is everywhere.
Yeah. If there was one thing that we could do, number one, like if you had a business plan, you got to do 1 before 2 and 2 before 3, otherwise you're all out of whack. What's that one thing? Would it be, stopping the crime rate? I don't know. Would it be attracting tourists so we can shake all the money out of their pockets? Would it be having a casino? Would it be better housing stock? What's the absolute first thing we should do?
Well, these are like a lot of loaded questions.
Sorry. There's no
No,
easy questions building a city.
you're good. Um, Building the economy would be first. Um, Finances are at the root of so many problems, crime, poverty, all those things. So if there were more businesses for people to work, that would create not only income for more people, some of those places could be like community based or something of that nature. And it gives other groups an outlet. You can come here. Right now, all they have is like a movie theater,
But
I
it's
think, and a bunch of clubs.
in Niagara Falls. But
Hmm.
isn't that way up near Military Road and the Outlet
That's
Mall?
it.
There's not a
Yep.
movie theater downtown.
No. And there probably won't be one. And they only have the casino. And if you don't get a job at the casino, you're probably working in healthcare as an LPN or maybe an RN. Not a lot of doctors downtown.
And a
And
casino job is like $12 an hour.
that's
Take it
it.
or leave it. Take a
Hmm.
hike. It's not, we were and I'll say that we were promised a much different economy when the casino was being considered. So don't take my passion, whoever's watching, as I have an axe to grind. They promised a casino and Shangri-La, and we're getting $12 an hour jobs that they can't even fill. Sorry. But
Nope.
we've tried all this. We've been told all this, and we have what we have, which is suboptimal, to say the best. Shootings and a movie theater up the street, way up, far up where nobody is. And again, that stamp plant, just to say, I know you don't know anything about it. I didn't mean to bring that up, but here's a couple $100 million investments, 45-minute drive from Niagara Falls. So that means if you don't have a car, you can't take the bus there. If, God forbid, maybe you have a criminal record, you can't get a car to drive a bus there.
Right.
This isn't helping the economy in any way, shape, or form that I can see.
Yeah.
And this is the number 3 elected official in the entire United States of America pushing this. I don't understand. It should be on Buffalo Avenue so anybody can walk to it. So
I don't understand it either.
yeah.
But that's not gonna, I don't see that as something that's going to build the economy and open up opportunities for people. The key is the opportunity. That's one of them. And I believe if more people have that opportunity, that would help the financial structure. But there's also a greater structure of racism, like within like city legislation, the like law enforcement. And there's also a great deal of like the system is a little bit lenient for offenders. In the shooting that I mentioned with my cousin, like she was shot by a person who shouldn't have never been released. So the crime laws are not as tough as they should be. And I believe if those were increased, it would encourage more people to not commit violent crimes, which would also decrease the crime statistics.
Yeah. I
So
thought the pendulum swung the other way, where now they're letting everybody off and no bail and no whatever. I don't keep up on that, but it seems like now at least the cops are complaining. I can arrest him somebody all the live long day, and they let him out 5 minutes later. I don't understand that argument. You still have to stop a shooting, but that's their excuse for the excuse, not their excuse, is that well we've let everybody out. I
yeah,
don't think
and
so.
that's unfortunate because that puts people at risk. That makes people vulnerable because there's no counseling or post-release assistance available for people who come out of jail or prison. Jail, prison, these are meant to be like behavioral correction methods, right? If the behavior hasn't been corrected, there is no after program for transition, they're likely to go right back.
Correct.
So that keeps the cycle going and going and going. My dad spent his entire life working in law enforcement. So I have a great deal of like knowledge about this particular field. And what we see in Niagara Falls is a cycle, it's a pattern. And that pattern has not been given any attention in recent years. And so that's why when I mention city legislation and city leaders, they've seen this pattern. They've seen these people go to jail, get out, go back, get out, go back, get out. And if they could have something in place where those laws were tighter and you go and you're going to stay, then these people that are maybe at risk of becoming like an offender, they'll be encouraged to do something else.
But it doesn't change. Like my job is my job, and I know what I do at my job. I think we need the police to tell us what they need to do this job. This is your job to stop crime. And they just seem to say, I've asked a lot of cops, they just seem to say, well, it is what it is. Or, you know, I can't, what am I going to do? I don't know. This is your job. I don't know. We pay you in order to give us an answer, right? I mean, I can't have an open discussion. Nobody would come on this type of a talk and oh yeah, I'm a city cop, and you know, here's my frustrations. Here's what we do well. They won't even talk. There's a wall of silence about the issue. Well, I don't know. I need you to tell me. This is your profession. And there's no discussion at all. If we can't talk about it, we can't have any, like Juneteenth, going back to that. Unless you can tell me why it's important and why I should open my mind to it, now it'll seep in. You know, once there's a crack, it'll seep into my head. If a cop isn't going to have a discussion about improving crime, who are we going to have it with?
Right.
I don't even understand that concept. So how do we break that wall of silence down?
Discussion. That's so important. They don't want to talk about it. Because like you mentioned in the very beginning, guilt. This is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. But I don't have guilt about my job.
No, but if you're doing underhanded things about your job, you might. If you're intentionally oppressing other people, you might. If you're seeing one crime committed by two different groups and you're allowing one to go free, but you jail the other, you might feel that guilt.
You know, God, you bring up just a crucial thing that we have to talk about, that we, as a community, that there are people doing bad things. It doesn't make entire groups bad things.
Right.
I was reading a book about the mob activities, because the mob is not, you know, the Italian mafia from the 30s. That's not it. It's a business model. A gangland activity, organized crime, is a business model. It's not an ethnicity or a time frame. So the model includes paying off elected officials and police. It just does. And they tell you in every city in America, this happens. Don't even buy into the notion that your city doesn't happen. Okay, well, if we're to believe that, now say that's true. We all have friends then that are somehow compromised. And maybe it's just free movie tickets, or maybe it's bags of cash, but it pollutes the system in some way. How do we have that discussion? How do we say it's not okay to do that because we're going to have Shangri-La? Go do that in Amherst. Go do that. Because I think Amherst probably says, go do that in Niagara Falls. We don't want you here, right? How does Niagara Falls turn the corner and say, don't do that here? We don't want that here. In whatever the topic is. I mean, I don't want to bash on police or bankers that aren't giving microloans. How do we turn it to, look, banker, give microloans to Niagara Falls? Because again, Niagara Falls is not, it's not Batavia. It's not Cleveland. Yeah. It is Niagara freaking Falls. Right. It's got more potential. What does a friend of mine say? It's the poorest rich city in the world. It's got all the resources to make itself billions of dollars, and it's doing nothing. I didn't pick Niagara Falls to try and study civics because it was just on the map. It has the potential to do its own business. Whatever it is, any idea can be fulfilled, and no idea is being fulfilled. How do I break that? How do we break that? I don't know. Man. Why did you come on this show? Who the hell are you? No,
that is an ongoing discussion, and it's gonna have to be done like every other great thing in history, with steps.
How are you still connected to the Falls? Your family?
They still live there.
And you come back frequently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. That's why I couldn't meet with you tomorrow. I have to fly in.
We need your brain on this. We need your family's brain on this. There isn't one answer. I'm not. So one of the things, one of the models you would do if you were going to change something is I would put myself forward saying, I have an idea, follow me. That doesn't work. Okay. That model's been taken and, you know, everybody does it. And then we get Jonestown, right? But the other model is all of us are smarter than any of us. I need, like you or your family, to start thinking this way also. or tell me I'm crazy, of, yeah, what would I do in this city at this moment with unlimited money or unlimited opportunity, or I'm the mayor right now in my own head? What would I do? If it's going to be, it's up to me. I think there's such desperation everywhere, but certainly in the Falls, which is all I'm caring about. How do we turn that around? I mean, I need your help. I need your help to start saying, do this, don't do that, talk to these people, don't talk to these people. How do we bring everybody to the discussion that you can have it all? Because they don't believe they can. Because, of course, they never have.
Yeah.
How do we, that's what I want to fix in one city, Niagara Falls, because it has all its own resources to do it.
Absolutely.
I didn't even know you until this morning. How do I know you for the rest of my life? How do we solve this?
We need to continue having the discussion. I'm not sure if Niagara Falls currently has town hall meetings.
I don't know.
Do that.
I don't know either.
I can get with Gwendolyn about it and see, because I'd be happy to do that. And I'm in town monthly, so I can also come in person and speak to people. We can get out in the community and begin to do things. My family would be happy to speak about this and meet with you or anyone else about this, because this is something that we are passionate about.
One of the things that we've gotten twirled up about is that, and I was a part of this, I worked for the state government for a long time, is that they've made of themselves rock stars out of elected officials. So part of civics that I want to deconstruct is that the mayor is just the mayor, very important person and a very unimportant person. It isn't the be all and end all. Right. They've made them into the be all and end all, but we got to deconstruct that and say, no, you're just one cog in the wheel. Your family here is every bit as big as whoever the mayor is, or whoever the governor is. We are all in this and all of equal importance. Yeah. I don't know how we can pull back that curtain, because that's what we need to do. Your family that you're going to see is just as important. And how do we elevate them in the discussion in 2021? I'm trying not to have elected officials on this show every week, because they already have a platform. I don't want to know what their solutions are. I want to know what your family solutions are, or problems or issues and ideas. Like, they have an idea of what will work. Not me. They live on their street. I can't tell them how to fix their street. They should tell me. I don't know how to rally that in 2021 and know who your family is, because I know who the mayor is. I want to know who your family is, or somebody else's family. Absolutely. And elevate them. So that's my challenge to you.
Absolutely. Oh, I can definitely help with that. It'd be super easy to gather a small group of them to discuss this with you. They can tell you about the streets, the potholes, the crime, the statistics, no jobs. They can talk about that endlessly because they live it.
And then specifically what you came on to share with us today for Juneteenth, let's bring it back to that of let's not commit, but let's brainstorm that 1 year from now, it will be a different event in the city of Niagara Falls. If I don't care about Atlanta or the rest of the world, that the world looks at Niagara Falls and says, holy cow, this is what that holiday means. It's not black, it's not white, it's not this, it's not that. It's not just fireworks and beer. It means something. Let's make Niagara Falls that. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to look to you. Let's commit to each other to do that.
Let's commit to that, to begin that in Niagara Falls, because that's a great step in the right direction. And you've got my support and my commitment today.
Right. Finney Neighbors, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for educating me.
Thank you for having me. This has been my pleasure. Great interview.
Safe flight tomorrow and welcome home in advance.
Thank you very much, Tom.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.